so much for coming. So, who had heard of this event before today? Yeah? Excellent. And who came spontaneously at the last minute because the internet told them? Yeah? Excellent. Well, it's wonderful to have you all here. I just want to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I want to acknowledge that we're in the lands of the Kurnai people and pay respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. And also thank my very wonderful friend Matt Langdon for hosting me at his bookshop. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, such a pleasure. So a long time ago, Matt Langdon approached me to come and talk to people about what I do. And this was in very far lands of America, and it was about 5 years ago, I think. And ever since then, we've been plotting deviously to get me over here in Victoria so that I could sort of share what I do more locally. And I didn't think that was ever going to happen because I've been living in Canada for the last 4 years. And then last year, the pandemic changed everything, and I came back to Melbourne, and here I am now. So yeah, it's definitely a surprise for me, as much as sort of anyone else who knew me, because I left Australia when I was 18, and I decided that I wanted to go and work in the movies and be adventurous and get involved with all the creative things that I'd sort of seen on the behind the scenes documentaries of Lord of the Rings, which came out when I was a 15-year-old in school. And it was such a big deal for me because up until that point I sort of was torn sort of between doing art and doing drama, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was up in Sydney. I was up in like the Blue Mountains, kind of Penrith area. I don't know if you heard about the floods or the flooding that's happened recently. Yeah, so that's exactly where I grew up. Is that whole like basin. Yeah, so it was a really great sort of place to grow up because there's a lot of arts in the Sydney area. Like my school had a lot of arts programs going, which was really awesome. And I think that's why my mum wanted me to go to that school, was because she knew that I was really creative and she just wanted to like encourage me. So props to my mum. Woo! Yeah, it definitely gave me the opportunity to sort of go full blast in a lot of things. The unfortunate thing was I had absolutely no idea how to make a career of that. So, hey there, welcome. I'm just going to check my thing's working. I think it's working. If anyone's in the live stream, hi. Say hi in the chat, please do. Hey there. So yeah, I had all these really, really awesome opportunities, for which I'm so grateful. But I also had no idea what to sort of do with my life because, you know, you get an idea of school, what an arts career looks like. It's sort of like you see these people working in, I don't know, either arts teachers or, I'm trying to think back what we even thought art was, like going to like the National Gallery and seeing all this like really contemporary art that I didn't really get. Because I was a huge fantasy nerd, absolutely. Like from like this big, pretty much from as young as I can remember, and I was really into making worlds and designing stuff, and yeah, and so the only thing that I could really see for myself was the film industry, because Peter Jackson came out with all those behind the scenes documentaries and Lord of the Rings. So as a 15-year-old kid who's like staying up for hours at night writing the backstory for the different races of my fantasy world, which had all these like feuding factions. Does it sound familiar? Yeah. So at that time I hadn't got into like Dungeons & Dragons or LARPing or anything, but I was playing computer games as well. And I think that's what gave me the idea that you could like world build. So I was into Baldur's Gate. And yeah, I had 6 CDs. It was a 6 CD set back in the days when we actually put CDs into computers to play games. And yeah, I used to stay up late playing Baldur's Gate because I was addicted to playing fantasy games. And I also, I guess I just hadn't really seen anything like that before. I hadn't seen like the Dungeons & Dragons fantasy world at that time, and now it's such a big thing. It's become really big on the internet. There's lots of live streams. There's real famous people doing, you know, comedy shows and stuff. So it's a lot more accessible, I think, if you have an internet connection. But for me, growing up in the bush in Colo, which is not that dissimilar to Gippsland, it's a really, really similar kind of like ruggedness to the mountain areas. Yeah, that was what I had. So yeah, I kind of didn't really know what the heck to do with myself. And then I saw these behind the scenes documentaries for the Lord of the Rings, which is massively up my street. So I was seeing all these people making creatures and costumes and miniatures, and the guys and girls in New Zealand did an absolutely amazing job putting that together, and kind of almost half killed themselves putting the three movies on, but it was a real turning point for the New Zealand film industry, and it certainly put that on my radar. Now you may notice that I just said New Zealand, like a Kiwi. What's a kid from Sydney saying New Zealand? It's because when I left school I went straight to New Zealand and was like, I'm here! I don't know what to do. So I put myself in New Zealand, which we're very lucky as Australians to be able to do that, because it's a back and forth kind of like, you know, you can come to my country and live here, and you know, after 2 years you can get support from the government kind of thing going on in New Zealand, which was amazing. And it made it very easy for me as a 18-year-old leaving school for the first time to sort of be like, yeah, I'm gonna follow this passion that I have, and sort of have this like very rough shape of in my head of what that might look like. I just kind of wanted to be around all that. And I guess I need to fast forward all the kind of times that it didn't work out that I was following my passion. I think the biggest thing was that I was just really persistent, and I just kept circling back to, okay, this is still the thing that I want to do, and just kind of put myself in the place where those opportunities could happen to me. And I had a lot of people looking out for me as well, which is awesome. And it's, when I say that, I mean it's sort of like people were very generous with wanting to share what it is they do, because they were passionate too. And that doesn't always happen in the creative industries. So I do want to definitely acknowledge those people and the gift of their generosity to me as this very enthusiastic kid that loved dragons and making stuff and had no idea what I was doing. So how did I go from that to working on over 20 blockbuster Hollywood movies and, you know, traveling the world and stuff? I sometimes don't know. I sort of look back and I'm like, is this really my life? Like, I don't understand how it is that I went from this kid in the bush with all these dreams to like just having this amazing opportunities and experiences, except that I put myself out there and made myself uncomfortable with the places that I put myself. And doing that it's not easy for somebody who is, I guess, neurodiverse. I'm definitely neurodiverse. Like, I don't know exactly in what way, but I know that my brain doesn't work like normal. I said normal, that's not right. I know that my brain doesn't work like people who are mainstream. So I can see that for myself I needed to sort of do things that made sense to me, based on professionalism. So I aspired to make myself as professional as possible, so that when I was picked up for opportunities, I was always going to fit in a set role. And that was such a gift, because you can be unskilled. Hey, welcome, come grab a seat. So yeah, I kind of just pivoted on this idea that all these people who worked in movies worked really, really dedicatedly, and they pushed themselves, and I think I role modeled on that as being my personal thing, that I wanted to just be as excellent as possible, and kind of just constantly work on that for myself. So even though I didn't have a lot of experience when I was put in those circumstances, you know, like catch this ball and do something with it, like figuratively, that's this metaphorical ball of opportunity, because I conducted myself in a way that made me easy to work with, I was teachable. And that's probably the greatest thing that happened for me, was that I made myself useful. I made myself professional and useful, and I hope I didn't think I knew everything, because I was surrounded by all these amazing people who just extraordinary levels of skill, and I got over my own ego to be like, no, I don't know what I'm doing. Here, please teach me. I would love to learn. So I kind of made a career of being like an assistant almost. I was assisting all these really extraordinary people, and I got to work with all my heroes. I got to work with those people who made Lord of the Rings. Those are my colleagues. Those are my friends and my housemates, which is phenomenal. And by the time that happened, I had also gotten past being a fan myself. So, like, I'm still definitely a fan of all their work and all their movies, but I was there in a professional context. I wasn't there being like, you know, like, I'm in the most amazing place in the world, it's like Disneyland. And I certainly was like that at the beginning, like absolutely. I was totally a kid in a candy shop when I went to Weta Workshop for the first time, and just saw all these amazing things that they're doing. So I'm referencing stuff that maybe some of you don't know about it. Have you heard of Weta Workshop in New Zealand? Yeah, there's some nodding. Cool. Okay, so for folks who don't know about Weta, it is a design studio and a manufacturing studio, and what they do is they build imaginary things. So if you can create anything and you have a team of really amazing artisans to do it, you're going to go to Weta. They're like the go-to dream team for Hollywood movies these days. So they've done Avatar, they've done the like superhero movies, they've done Mad Max, they've done Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and all these like big name movies, all the special effects of those movies. So special effects is actually, it's kind of a confusing term because when you say it, folks think, oh, computer effects, you know, like animation. That's visual effects. Special effects is when you do things for the camera. So it's like magic for just live recording. So you're doing like illusions and stuff. So if you've got to have something like explode or look like a car crashed or look like a person turned into an alien, but you don't have a computer handy, and you have a team of like artists basically who are going to make that happen, that's a special effect. And it could be as simple as like someone got a blood wound, or someone's got vampire teeth, or someone else has got like, I don't know, horns growing and they've got to grow on camera. Like you're going to have people who are creating that illusion for the camera, and they're going to figure out how to do it. And it's just the most amazing thing because there's no two stunts that are the same. So I started in a career in the film industry with a team of special effects artists, and that's what I became. I became a special effects technician. Which, yeah, it's really amazing still to say it, because what that did was that gave me so many skills and so many boosts to my own artistic ability. So to be clear, in the film industry, the way that the film industry works is normally you have different departments working on things. So you have like your actors, you have your costume department, you have your behind the scenes like lighting, crew, rigging, sound, etc. And they're all broken up into different departments. Special effects teams normally will work with the stunt team on set. They'll build everything on set, but in New Zealand it's different because they have a workshop that's specially for special effects, so it's like a design studio. So what happened with us was we would have films come in-house, and we would do like 3 or 4 films at the same time, but we weren't actually going out onto set. We were sort of just doing, you know, taking something, like doing a commission almost, like if you're an artist doing a commission, and you get like, you know, someone wants their D&D character made into like a little figure or something, and then suddenly you've got like 4 people doing that. There's 4 different clients. Same idea, except just on a different scale. So I was working on all these really amazing movies, half of which unfortunately didn't end up being released. So I can't really talk about them outside of my crew. But I was learning so much from just the level of like volume that we would get in. Sort of like you never really knew what you were going to be doing. Hey there, welcome. Come on in. Just going to check this is working. Looks like it's working. There's one viewer. Hey. Yeah, come grab seats. Make yourself at home. Thanks for coming at such short notice.
That's all right.
So we would have all these different sort of films coming through the shop. We'd have like one particular prop for this movie, and then, you know, the costume for another movie. And I got kind of tossed around between departments because I didn't have a specialized skill set when I joined the workshop, which was great, absolutely great. Because when I joined, I didn't really know what I was good at. I knew that I was good at designing, and I knew that I was good at being helpful, but I didn't really have a fixed kind of like, this is my thing. You know, I'm good at leather, I'm good at building stuff, I'm good at machines. Like I didn't have that, whereas a lot of folks at the workshop did have that, so they were kind of in different departments. It was really great, because what that meant was that I got to kind of just learn from everybody and just get this really wide experience from all these different people. And what that taught me was how to think about design. Because at my heart, I'm a designer. I wanted to go into the film industry to design things. And originally, when I very first turned up to Weta with my little portfolio and showed what I'd done, I was given the warm letdown, like, this is great, keep it up. But I definitely didn't have the level that I needed to have if I was going to enter the industry as a designer. And after 4 years of being exposed to materials, production processes, making stuff with my hands, seeing how things work from beginning to end, I absolutely understand that. And I feel like it was a real gift for me to be able to have that practical materials experience. Because I tell you guys, I was like drawing from a young age. I didn't have any material experience. I love the idea of making things, but I had no idea. I had no skills. The skill was pen and paper, as I think a lot of people's is. Like, that's sort of what you kind of retreat to when you're living in fantasy in your mind, and you have all these like really cool ideas. It's like the most easy thing to draw. So I was always drawing from a young age. I think I was about 2 or 3, and my mum just couldn't tear me away from pen and paper. So yeah, naturally when I joined the industry, I was like, I want to be a designer, because I've been creating stuff in my mind for so many years. I've been creating all these worlds and stuff, but I also recognized, like I said, I didn't have any particular skill except for just passion. So putting myself in a place where I was flexible and teachable was the best thing for me, because it meant that I was useful and I could get into all these different positions and opportunities, because I was open to being like, oh sure, I've never riveted a tank before, but yeah, show me what to do, like just that kind of flexibility. It really does make so much more possible. So as you can see, I've got a little display here. This is just a few things that I've got with me, part of which I'm working on right now, and part of which I've done already. So I just want to explain what we're kind of looking at here. Got a couple of illustrations that I did last year. We've got 2 mannequins, well, 1 mannequin and an armor stand. These are costumes that I myself wear. I've either made or sourced those materials, or found other people who could make them better than me, put them together. And then at the back I've got a little bit of a tool display. So these are the kind of things that normally would be hidden, because they're the things that would make other things happen. But these are so important to share for me now, because I had no idea how to use any of these when I joined the creative industries. I was like this is my thing, So what have we got? What do you want to start with? I mean, I'm here for you all. What do you want me to talk about? There's a lot going on here.
The armor.
The armor? Okay. Woo! Thank you from that fine fellow in the back. This is a sort of replica armor. This is 15th century medieval armor, and I have it because I fight in armor regularly, and I do this because I'm very passionate about sword fighting and everything to do with sword fighting as well. And I started just being excited about swords, but then the more that you put yourself in places where people are doing sword fighting, the more you want to have good stuff and look good. It's kind of like it's never ending, really. It's like character leveling, except in person. So this is the result of many years of character leveling for me, and it's a beautiful set of armor from Quebec, where I was living, made by a blacksmith over there. And it is on an armor stand, which I have been building for somebody else. I've made 2. This one's a copy of the other type. And I'm particularly proud of this because everything about it is upcycled. So I should just leave the, okay, there you go, there's the armor. Bring it around, you guys can touch it if you want. Yeah, go for it. Give it a wiggle. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So the sports game that I usually use it for, it's not full contact. It's demonstrated contact. So like it's a sports game. So if you imagine what's reasonable in a sport when you're shoving somebody, like you know that you've been shoved, but you're not trying to put them on the floor. I do also do martial arts, and when I'm not wearing armor, we're practicing to throw people. We're practicing to actually kind of put them down, but we're doing it in a way that's a training way. So I can practice to hit someone at full strength, but I don't need to do that in a sparring match because I want to go take my friend to the pub afterwards, and, not the hospital. So yeah, with this particular one, this I would wear for a sports game, and it would be taking about that much. So yeah, that's probably the hardest I would ever get hit. I hope. Yeah. I'll leave it out so you guys can have a wee look after the talk is over. So what I have been building is this guy, which is completely upcycled. So everything about this is from recycled or rubbish materials. This is the post is I got it from the tip. This was an old piece of timber that was too twisted for someone to use, so I cut it in half so that the twist was not visible. I used PVA glue to seal it because I didn't have any varnish. So this is actually PVA glue and it looks fine. I know, right? It absolutely works. The steel bits are actually from the bottom of an IKEA hat stand that I took apart. So this is the top of the hat stand, and I've just like reorganized it. And then I've done. Do you recognize what these are? I know it looks terrible. It looks very PG. But does anyone recognize the great Australian sport?
Yeah, it's cricket.
Cricket wicket. Yeah, there we go. So I use cricket wickets for these and these. These are chopsticks. And then at the top, I haven't assembled it yet because I still need to draw this properly, but this is actually half a rolling pin. And this is going to hold the helmet. So yeah, I've got, this is also upcycled. This is from an old couch, this leather. This is, like I stripped the couch myself. It was left on the side of the road and someone had cut a huge hole in it, and it's like this beautiful leather. So I meticulously stripped the couch of all the leather and have now upholstered it. And this is from the cushion of my friend who no longer wanted the cushion and saved the fabric because it was really beautiful. So still in the process of being finished. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put some fabric, like stuffing in there, like what you put in a pillow. So it's just got a little bit of little padding, and I'm going to stitch it up, and then it's done. So yeah, and this is a very practical thing. This is not glamorous at all, but I'm really happy with it because I think it does show just how much I have learnt skill-wise, and coming from, a background of just drawing, going from pen and paper to being able to build a fully functional piece like this, which is going to last a really long time, out of fully upcycled materials. Like that's, to me, it's a bit of a growth journey. I learned how to upholster. This is upholstering, the process of stitching fabric around pillows and things. I learned to upholster on the set of X-Men because the X-Jet, the jet that the X-Men ride in, had all these beautiful foam seats that needed upholstery on them. But the job was so complicated, and the detail that had to happen, they needed one dedicated person to do that because the people who had the experience in the department were responsible for all these other things as well. So they needed someone who had the madness to be able to actually just do the job and take charge of it. And I was hired for that, even though I'd never upholstered before, ever. Never did I think I was going to. But that became my thing. So they showed me how to do it, and I learned from a guy who builds sports cars. He does, like, from scratch, he makes yeah, I know, it's like this crazy set of skills and people who work in special effects. And so he had all the knowledge of how to do like the interiors of all these really gorgeous cars. And he taught me how to do the upholstery, which was this really, really technical job and very meticulous. And I watched X-Men before coming to this talk. I hadn't actually seen the film that I worked on until the other day when Matt and I were talking about it. And I finally watched it in the first 10 minutes. And I'm looking at Professor Xavier's chair and this tiny imperfection on the bubble on the back of his chair. I was like, no! I'm fine. I'm okay. It was years ago. But you get the idea. Like, that chairs were my babies. I was not the only person to work on the chairs, so it was definitely a team effort. But the actual upholstery part and making sure that they went off beautiful, that was might be a little attached. Anyway, no, it was a really, really fantastic job. I also got to be the butt double for Jennifer Lawrence's character. Because, no spoilers about the movie, but there's a scene where all of them are suspended in the air with when Quicksilver's running around doing his thing. So, fun fact, I didn't know this before working on X-Men, and I'm absolutely sure I can talk about this because it's been put on the internet in a behind-the-scenes video. When he's doing all those scenes, that's actually for camera. So all the actors are pretending to be frozen. They're acting to be frozen. It's the simplest trick in the book, but I never realized. I always thought it was just computer effects until I joined the team. And actually what they're doing is they're just pretending. They're on stage being like, yeah, pretty much. And because they're shooting long scenes and stuff, the actors all need support frames when they're holding themselves in the air. So they're like basically having like body casts underneath their clothing, holding them up so that they can be suspended in these like lengthy positions. Yeah. So it's like all these really cool tricks that you would never think of when you're watching a movie as to how they achieved it, because you shouldn't. If you're watching a movie, you should not be thinking about how they did it, unless you're me. But even I get like pulled in. So that's kind of what I do is all this like trickery and magic and stuff for the films, and I usually learn from other people who have the know-how to do it. So yeah, it's like you kind of have to have a little bit of everything, because when you're problem solving, like how would you problem solve that? How would you hold someone in the air? There's like probably 6 different ways you could do that. But what's the best solution? Whoever's on the team, you're going to put your heads together and be like, okay, I think we'll do it this way. And you try it. And there's no wrong answer really, because if it works, it works. And better still, if it works and it's, you know, on time, under budget, you win. Yeah. But no one really sees what you do when you're like creating that process and you're like coming up with all these ideas to like do that. Yeah. I'm going to take just a tiny wee break because
we still haven't heard about who you butt double for again.
Yeah, you missed
oh,
started with the butt double. And
Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah, sorry.
You went into suspending people in air.
Yes.
From butt double.
That's right. Thank you. Good save. Jennifer Lawrence, because she and I had exactly the same dimensions. And I was the only person on the team, other than.
Start looking at you differently.
Oh, hey, look, it was an honor. That's all I can say. Yeah, I joined the team, and they're like, "Hey, Sam, you've got the same like physicality as Jennifer." And in the very first like week I was working with them, they're like basically putting me in this thing that takes the impression of my ass. And I'm like, it's a really weird way to get to know me, guys. Like, you know, I feel like we could have just done beers. Yeah, it was pretty funny. And the only other person that was the same height and like size was this absolutely terrific chick called Kelsey, who basically takes apart cars and puts them back together so that they can like do flips and stuff when they're on cue. So that she's like the mechanic person. She works with the mechanic team. So they'll do like, have you ever seen a car flip in the air and you wondered how they do it? There's heaps of ways that they can do it, but one of the things they'll do is they'll drop something onto the road that hits it so that the car goes in the other direction and like fires up in the air. So cool. I never learned to do that. I just had that team in the same department area, so I got to kind of like, you get it done. Yeah. Yeah. It's like Jennifer Lawrence.
Same
Butt double for Jennifer Lawrence. guys, welcome to the stream. I just wanted to make sure it was still working because I don't have a tech person today. I usually am the tech person as well. So, I was saying earlier that when I was in New Zealand, all the films and everything, they would send their requests to us and we would work on them in the shop, which meant I never actually got to see on set how things were like going ahead, unless it was done locally like a Hobbit was. Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to work on set on The Hobbit, but I certainly did see what was going down the road to Peter Jackson's studio. And I think there were a couple of other films. Yes, there were. There were a couple of other films in New Zealand that were shot there, but they didn't end up getting released. So I got to see those on set. I got to work on set, but I didn't. For the most part, I was mostly working in the shop. And then I moved overseas. I moved to Canada back in 2013 because, well, there were a lot of reasons. It was a good time to do it for me. But the biggest impact for me was that I'd never actually worked outside of the safety of, you know, that crew at Weta Workshop and the design teams. I had a little bit of an idea of what to expect, but it was very different because everything over in North America was done, you know, big departments, like this is your one job and this is what you do. We put you in this position. And because I'd been working in all these different departments, kind of jumping around, being a gopher or an assistant or, you know, just helping all these much better people than myself, I didn't really know where to put myself. And I started listing, you know, this is all the things I can do, and they look at me and they're like, how can you do all these different things? How is it that you are so diverse? And I was like, well, in New Zealand we have to be, because the industry is much smaller. So people do have to multitask because, you know, you don't have a big enough industry to support people being in all these different jobs, and that's just their one thing. They have to just kind of multitask. And that's what I'd gotten used to, and I didn't realize how unusual it was till I went to North America, and everyone's just like, this is my one job, and if I really, really love it, I'm going to do another job. And they kind of just can make a career of just doing one thing. So I put myself in, I put myself out there as a special effects technician, but I also got work as a sculptor in the sculpting department. I had no idea what to expect. Sculpting, I mean, I had done sculpting, but I didn't understand what it looks like on a film scale. It's absolutely huge. It's like sculpting in a film context is when you are doing scenery that the carpenters can't do. So carpenters will go in and they'll build things just like what you'd expect, builders would do. Straight lines, set angles, that kind of thing. Sculptors will go in after the carpenters and they'll do all the like organic shapes. So anything that's like broken down, or rocks, or trees, or sculptures, like statues and things, like that's what the sculptor's job is. So it's like, it's the more creative aspect of building. It's like building, but not. So I got work on Warcraft, which was the movie adaptation of the same game. And I worked on set for Warcraft because we were building, even though predominantly the movie was CG, all the sets were real. So we had actors on set, human actors and people playing orcs with, they were wearing costumes, and then the computer would add to that, but they still needed physical sets to be in. Because I don't know if you've ever seen anyone doing acting in front of a blue screen or a green screen. Yeah, it's not great, unless you have the most amazing special effects team in the world, and that costs so much money, and it's much easier just to build a set. And then once the people who are making that film have that footage, they can add stuff to it, because you've got something to start with. You don't have to build everything from scratch. So I was on the team building the city of Stormwind for Warcraft, and it was pretty phenomenal. It was also an enormous job, and it was done in winter and very tiring. And I got quite sick after that job, unfortunately, because I wasn't aware of things that I could have been doing to keep myself safe. So I don't blame anyone for that, but it was a learning lesson for me about things that I could be doing to protect myself better in my work. And I'm talking about using PPE, so personal protective equipment. I don't remember someone telling me the hazards of the product I was using. They probably did, but I didn't understand, and I got quite sick. So I was actually sick for 2 years after that job, and part of that was mental sickness as well. I just was so defeated that I didn't feel like I could work. It took me 2 years to get back into the game, and after that I went and got work on X-Men, fortunately. But it is something really important to bring up for me, because I have mentioned how I started, how I was really passionate and enthused about just getting involved and being open to opportunities. And I think at some point in the process I missed understanding the hazards of the materials and the environments. And I was much younger as well. I was in my 20s when I got into the film industry. So your body can take a lot more of a, pounding, a lot more abuse. But I do see a lot of young people coming into the industry who don't realize that the things we work with are toxic. The things we work with, like noise will wreck you. If you don't cover your ears, you're going to lose your hearing by the time you're 50. Like it's the same in any construction industry. It's just that I think I just had a little bit of a blind spot when it came to the film industry, because it's just you're doing such really cool and amazing things. But I want to put it out there as something that's really important is, be the dork who's wearing the protective equipment, because it's your body, your body. And a lot of people working on their own passionate stuff in their own rooms, like their workshops from home, people doing cosplay, I don't think they understand the danger of exposing themselves to some of the toxins that they're breathing in, like this stuff. I bring it in as a little demo. You don't want to breathe this in too much. It's not good for you. You want to have ventilation. You want to have some kind of airflow in your space when you're doing gluing, because even if you might not feel sick immediately, that just builds up in your body. It gives you sickness over a long period of time. People doing amazing things with foam, like cosplayers, they do these sculptures and stuff, and I look at their workspaces, and it's like I have physically experienced the effects of foam in my body. It made me sick. I was using foam, and I look at them and I think, I really, really hope someone helps you set up a better ventilation for your setup, because I don't want you to be doing this and then this is the thing that makes you ill, because for a lot of people, making stuff is their outlet, it's their creative expression. So yeah, it's really worth spending time to learn how to safely manage the materials that you're working with. Yeah. And I don't want people to limit themselves, because I think it's more important to have the passion for the thing and then figure it out as you go, than to be like, oh, I'm so scared of this that, it might kill me. Well, anything might kill me, breathing might kill you. Yeah, I shouldn't make jokes. I'm sure there's someone that's died from breathing, but you get my point. It's like, if you're passionate about something, be professional as well. Give yourself the credit to become good at it. Don't downplay it. Really just give yourself that allowance to be like, no, this is something that I care enough to be good at, Like that's you deserve that. You shouldn't be ashamed of that. Whatever your creative outlet is. But yeah, treat it with the esteem of the thing that makes you happy, Which should also be the thing that keeps you well and healthy. Yeah. Brought to you today by KS Bond.
Cool.
How are we going for time, Matt?
It is 7:45.
45
I should let
minutes.
everyone know too, I should have done this before. There's toilets out the back there if you need.
Cool. So, I also have a pirate outfit, as you may have noticed. This is because at some point along the way I discovered LARPing, and I don't know how I hadn't discovered it earlier, because it pretty much married all of my passions into one, which were making cool things for fantasy worlds. I have been playing a game in Quebec, which is pretty amazing. It's called Bicoline. I was living in Montreal for the last 4 years, about 4 years before the pandemic, pre-pandemic era. And Montreal has this extraordinarily high community of LARPers. Like, I'm talking 12,000 LARPers on record, active LARPers in the province of Quebec. And because it's a French...
people in the room that don't know what LARPing is.
Oh, hey, so LARPing, yes, I beg pardon. LARPing, it's an acronym. It stands for Live Action Roleplay, which is something that developed out of tabletop roleplay, so like Dungeons and Dragons, but then at some point the players of such a game were like, hey, you know what would be great is if we actually made costumes and did this in real life, and developed this entire system. It wasn't just one group of people, it happened kind of all over the place, but developed an entire system of gameplay based around role-playing, which now has developed into something that is very broad. The concept of roleplay can be any theme. You can have Battlestar Galactica roleplay, you could have Dungeons and Dragons roleplay, you could have roleplay set in a post-apocalyptic era with no particular world that it's attached to. It's a very broad kind of thing, and a lot of people do it now. It used to be that LARPers had a bad name for a while because the level of skill when it came to making costumes wasn't necessarily that high. So when LARPing entered them, and the consciousness of people internationally, it was like this image of people with foam sticks in the woods, sort of wearing these dorky Halloween costumes. And I think for a while that was certainly a thing. As I said earlier, passion first. Don't let them stop you. Don't let them laugh at you. Just get really good so that they can, want to join in eventually. Which is exactly what's happened now. There's so many people doing this to a really, really high degree that LARPing has become, I don't know, it's sort of become its own phenomenon, really. Because there's the costuming element, there's creatures, there's the gameplay, the storytelling, and just becoming a fantasy character in a game. And predominantly, LARPing is medieval fantasy. That's like, when you say LARPing, most often people will be playing LARP like in a medieval fantasy world. So there'll be orcs, there'll be elves, there'll be dark elves, there'll be humans, there'll be goblins, there'll be kobolds, there'll be the works. But LARPing can, as I mentioned, can also be post-apocalyptic, or it could be 3 days, 3-day long LARP, and that's it, like beginning and end, and whatever happens in that story happens in that story, and then that's the end of it. So it's a big thing. There is a lot of LARPing in the Melbourne area. Melbourne actually has one of the largest active LARPs internationally in terms of weekly turn up. It's Swordcraft is the biggest. So every week they have a battle game on Friday nights, and I think internationally they hold the record for the largest turnout every single week. And then they have other LARPs around the Melbourne area. There's Black Powder and Bloodlines is one that's held down. I think it's held down in the Great Ocean Road, and that's actually a colonial LARP that examines the themes of colonialism. It's very, very raw because, of course, the history of this country. It's also done in a fantasy context, so you're looking at fantasy races representing Indigenous people and invaders, which is absolutely fascinating. And my friends who attended this LARP said it was very powerful because they're participating in this activity that it's very in your face, and people joining the LARP are doing it intentionally. It's done in an intentional roleplay way to put the experience of that on the players. So yeah, I mean, that's very much the opposite of this is a fantasy escapism. This is more like a social examination. So yeah, there's a great potential in LARPing for a lot of things. For myself, I certainly did a lot of character growth through LARPing because my first experience was being invited to come be a mentor at a camp called Wizards and Warriors, which was a summer camp for kids in Massachusetts. And I was a volunteer counselor, playing a heroic character to come guide these young heroes, for 6 weeks. And I'd never done it before. I'd never done LARPing, and it really just showed me the potential because in that context, it was kind of like, it was more LARP light that compared to other LARPs that I've done. It was very, it was just using the themes of heroism and using the young heroes as the people who drove the story to give them the sense of being able to create their own story and their own journey. And yeah, it just opened my mind to what the potential was, and all of the camp counselors were hero characters as well. So I got to discover the heroic version of me and play that character, which is what we were encouraged to do. Encouraged to sort of be the heroic fantasy version. And from that, I created Samwyn Silverheart, who was the captain of a skyship. I wasn't a pirate. I don't know what I was. I was sort of like this traveling mercenary character, but I was a heroic character. I also got scripted to become the Raven of Odin because the theme for that particular adventure was Ragnarok, and it turned out plot-wise that I was secretly the Raven of Odin in transformation, which was really fun. But I kept Samwyn when I went to Bicolline, which was the LARP that I just mentioned. So Bicolline is unique in the sense that it is unlike every other LARP because it's without a story. So usually what happens in live action roleplay is there'll be a story, there'll be players, and there'll be a dungeon master who's coordinating that, much like in tabletop roleplay. However, Bicolline started from a group of players who were playing Warhammer, and they wanted to build a world that was more guilds and countries rather than individuals from like a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. And so they structured it so that it would be groups that were driving the game rather than individuals, which has resulted in a really, really extraordinary thing because the size of this community of people doing this has endured. It's like it's not dependent on individual personalities to keep the game going. It's dependent on the guilds and the groups, which has proven very, very successful. And as Matt was saying earlier, like, you asked me if we could do it here, and I sort of said no, very decisively. And it's because it's developed over 20 years with all these players who've invested in this game together as guilds, as groups. And I'm talking like, 15, 20 people in a group. So you imagine a community of hundreds of guilds coming together so that they can build this game. And it's absolutely extraordinary because they've also built buildings on site, and there's 250 of them at the last count. I think it's probably closer to 300 now. And these are player-built buildings that represent their characters and the character of their guild, the themes of their country. It's immersive and amazing. And when they go into the space to play in person, everything they wear is telling a story of who their character is. So the detail is just next level, like the expectations of what they look like, because they're political. Everything is political because it's a geopolitical war game, unlike a tabletop roleplay game. That's what it's based on.
Can you talk about the time scale of it? It's played all through the year, but then you get together once a year, right?
Yeah, good idea. So, most live action roleplay games, first of all, they're not turn-based, whereas Bicolline is turn-based. So every action in the game that happens, there's turns. I'm sure that a lot of people are familiar with the concept. So when you want to do an action on your turn, you can do it. There's 4 turns a year. 4, my lord. There's 4 turns a year at Bicolline, which means that it's every 3 months. Every 3 months there's an action. And that should reflect everything that the country or the nation or group of people want to do with their resources every 3 months. So it's a very long game. It's very, very long. And the campaigns are fought monthly. There's monthly, like from April through to November, which is the warmer months in Canada, there's kind of like 8-hour campaigns. And what they do is they reflect what's going on in the political world. So the virtual game of Bicolline is happening. Imagine, like there's a continent with different nations and they all want to eat each other, or do peace treaties or protect each other, or that kind of thing. And that all goes on in those 4 turns a year. But if something happens in the game and one of the player guilds says, "Hey, I want to bring this into the real world," they'll make a campaign. and then the campaign will reflect the conditions of what's going on in the virtual world, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. The way that they balance that is resources. So if you want to put certain things into field, if you want to field like a war machine, or you want to field a monster, and those are superpowered units on the field, you have to be able to pay for it. So there's a player economy as well. There's solar that you have to pay for things with. There's also trading cards, so you have to trade for certain things, like resources get other resources, that kind of thing. So that should give you an idea of the scale of the game, because anytime you want to achieve a goal, you've got to do the work for it. So you'll see some players turning up to live events, and they'll have like a chest full of trading cards. You know, like there's their 6,000 acres of forest, there's their ports, there's their, you know, peasants, and they'll be doing their actions, trading, and trying to achieve a certain goal, because you need certain resources to be able to get something. Like, say, for example, me, I'm a captain in the world. I actually own a boat. To get said boat, I needed to take a loan, I needed to acquire resources, I needed to either wait a year while someone built my boat with the resources that I got, like timber, peasants, seamen, sea persons, that kind of thing. I had to either wait, metal, other things. There's other things that are components of the recipe for a boat. So in order to achieve that, I either had to wait a year while someone did that. Also, someone had to have a shipyard to build said boat, and then probably pay them a fee to do that. Or I could buy a used one. So I opted towards buying a used one. And then I traded with the used one for another one, and then I traded with that one for another one. And then by the time I got through with that, and I was very fortunate because I was friends with somebody who happened to own the nicest boat at Bicoline, in the Bicoline world, which has elven sails. There's 3 ships in the entire game that have elven sails, and I have one of them. I'm very proud of her. And yeah, so I have a piece of paper, this very humble piece of paper with my name, my character's name that is, and the name of the boat, and the fact that I own this boat. The amount of work that went into that piece of paper, I cannot tell you, because it's negotiating, it's trading, it's convincing people that you don't, you know, want the boat so that you can go raid their harbour or something. You know, it's like all that kind of in-person, physical politicking. And it's just a flippin' boat. Like I don't have a nation. I don't have, you know, I'm not anything more than just a sea captain. Not a pirate. I'm very clear on this. It's bad for business.
You did say that was a pirate costume.
I did, damn it. It's the
Cover
patch.
blind.
It's the patch. I'm a fruity captain with a missing eye. Yeah, so all of the things that I've done have achieved what? A boat in the world, which I can now use to trade. I can take items from one part of the world to the other. I can take passengers and interact with the virtual game. So that's actually why I did it, was I wanted to interact with the virtual game in a way that the people who play that game could recognize I had worked for it. Because it's just well and easy to turn up to Bicoline and be like, oh hey, this is amazing. I feel like I'm, you know, on holiday in this amazing world. But because so much of that community have worked for what they've got, and they've got this functioning economy, having something to show for your involvement is such a sign of, you know, I respect your game enough to actually be playing it. Now, to be fair, I haven't done much with my boat in the last 12 months, but there's not been much going on, to be fair. But the costume that I have is also a reflection of the fact that I've done that work. So when I turn up at the physical location and I'm wearing my splendor, I've also got references to the virtual game in my costume, so that people that I'm interacting with who are invested in this world have just that clue of, oh, hey, here's the person that I might know their name, I might not have met them in person, but this is their character. Now, my guild is very small. I do actually also have a guild, because the more time you spend in Bicoline, the more responsibility you tend to get, and no regrets. But yeah, I'm also guild leader at Bicoline, and my guild is my crew, which is my friends that I bring to Bicoline and have them with me. Yes. So when I go into that physical environment, I have something to show for all that time that I've invested, and this is why it's such a successful sort of community, is because everyone there is doing well. Everyone who has been playing and is invested in that world has put that energy into the physicality as well as the online game. So, and I don't really know where I'm going with this. Just that it's.
How many people are there? I think that's the thing that blew me away. You said there's nearly 300 buildings. How many people turn up to?
Excellent question. So every month there's a campaign. The campaigns are sort of more the regular players, the fighters. So for campaigns there'll probably be about 500 on average, maybe 600. But then immediately after campaigns there's also tavern night. So people who don't want to or can't fight, or are just turning up to trade or meet people, they can come to tavern night and everyone's on site already. So tavern night tends to swell to about 500 if there's not that many there. The largest campaign I ever fought in was, I want to say 800, and I can't remember if it was 800 per side or just 800 total. But then during the summer months, there's a week-long event, which is basically a big festival. And it's kind of like, if you imagine the campaigns are like the TV series, then the week-long festival is the season finale. And it's called the week of the Grand Battle, the Grand Bataille, and it's 3,000 people on site. In this functioning, apparently medieval village, which is really more like a town. Actually, it's more like two towns because they're not next to each other and you have to walk between them. It takes 15 minutes. They really should, just have a ferry service or something. Yeah. It takes a long time to walk anyway. You get very fit. So yeah, it's 3,000 people on site, and this is like people who are in full garb. Like there's all kinds of different fantasy races. There's people there who they've been playing for a really long time. There's people there who've never played before, and they're just there because they've heard of this amazing thing, and they're probably with a friend. Because it's a little hard to turn up to Pickling without knowing people. You can do it, but it's just because it's its own functioning world. There's not really like a beginner's guide. It's sort of like you'd come with a group because you got invited. A few years ago, someone started kind of like a tourist guild for bringing foreigners, which is called the Voyage North, and they've done a very successful job of introducing the game to a lot of people who don't speak French. Although, unfortunately, because the Voyage North is only there once every 12 months, they don't get the same connection to the game as someone who would play every month or, be actually playing the virtual game. But it's still a wonderful experience. And I was a guest of the Voyage North for my first Pickling, which is how I got sucked in forever. Because I turned up and I was like, this is amazing. So I'm very thankful to them for doing that.
So all we have to do is just get every person in Yarram to start playing in a game. We're nearly there.
Excellent.
Yeah, so is Pickling on like private property, or is it and it just lays dormant when you're not having campaigns? Or
Yeah, there was a little sticky situation when the farmer who owned the property of all these people decided that he wanted to sell the land. They had to do a massive fundraiser and go to the Quebec government for help, but they were able to buy the property, and it's now owned by the business admin aspect of Pickling. So there are owners who own that property now, and the players are tenants of that land for 50 years at a time. So they'll get a 50-year tenancy for their building, and yeah, it's sort of a symbiotic thing.
You think about this because you've got some land.
no?
I do.
Oh, yay!
I don't have that much land.
So it was a very expensive sale because the farmer was very aware that there were very many people who wanted his property. But it's now in the hands of the organisation, they don't actually have anything to do with the play. They're sort of like the custodians of the game in a way. It's like the players will generate the actions for the game, but the owners are the custodians of the world in a way. So they will manage the events. They will host the property and the site and keep it maintained and so on. Yeah. But the players do come up with the actions that drive the events. Yeah. Any questions?
The hat there is very loud, so
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell us about some of the little trinkets that you probably picked up along the way?
I would love to. My hat is very loud. My character is a smuggler, so I initially didn't want to have such a loud hat.
Not a pirate.
Not a pirate.
Yes, quite. So it rotates when I wish to be less loud, and the feathers actually remove. But
Rotates while it's on.
yeah, hopefully not. If that does, if it does, then something's happened to my head. Yeah, so I will draw your attention to this fine fleur de lis. The black lily is the symbol of my guild, my parent guild. So I mentioned I'm a guild leader, but I actually have a parent guild that I'm sort of, I'm a guild leader, but I'm under that guild. So the guild that I'm with is the Blacklist, the Liste Noire, and the group are basically pre-salvage experts. I myself am friends with said pre-salvage experts, but as I mentioned, it is bad for business to be a pirate oneself. My friends and my guild members are all captains and individuals who engage in acts of salvage from
Collecting properties that's not officially yours.
Indeed. It's a slightly risky line of business. Whereas I'm a respectable trader myself, and so I keep my black lily very proudly but discreetly displayed. I also have the advantage of not wearing the blacklist all the time and people not knowing that I'm part of the Liste Noire. So the Liste Noire also became very well known because a few years ago, the situation was Bicoline was a French game, and the only English speakers, Anglophones, who were playing the game were the people coming with the Voyage North, and so there wasn't really a lot of alternatives in terms of people playing the game if you wanted to play but you didn't speak French. And then this wonderful fellow who had been playing the game forever, called Seth Longiver, and his guild decided that he wanted to encourage new blood, so he approached some people who had matured to the point that they wanted to play every month because they lived in the New England area. He approached them and said, "Would you like to join my guild?" And he could do that because there was only him in the guild, which was bending a rule in the game which says you have to have 5 people in your guild, and he had found a loophole, but he was also trying to genuinely build his own guild, so he invited all these Anglophones from New England. And I had just met them, I just started playing the game myself, and they invited me. No one really knew much about the Liste Noire until the very fateful Battle of Dinant. Dinant was a province that wanted to break away from the Empire. So the Empire is loosely based on the Warhammer world, similar concepts, but it's evolved in a different direction, but same idea. Dinant wanted to be its own province. The Empire did not like this. The Empire was like, "We're going to keep you," and Dinant was like, "I want to be free." And yeah, so there was a battle, big battle. It was in November. It was the coldest campaign. There was literally snow on the ground, snow and slush, and war machines. So the Empire, they are very good at doing siege action. They have a lot of war machines, a lot of money, a lot of provinces, so they can field a lot of weaponry. Now, about 2 weeks before the campaign, somebody from the Liste Noire built a war machine, and this fellow also happens to professionally make LARP weapons for a living. Like, he literally makes rent out of building and supplying Americans with foam weaponry. Now, he's an excellent designer as well. His name's Ben Becker, and he has created all these really lightweight, really fantastic foam weapons which work really well, look fantastic, and function under stress. He engineered a siege engine which was different to all the others because usually a siege engine at Bicoline fires forward, and what they're firing is they're firing little stress balls. So they're not hurting you, but they're just sort of like hard enough that you know when it's hit you. And they're usually fired by an air canister, which powers them. So you just hear this, and then you hear the cannon coming towards you. There's also ballistas, which fire foam, sticks of foam, which are meant to be like arrows, big arrows. Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. And if they touch you, you're done. Like there is no coming back from being hit by a war machine. And so like a single machine can take out a whole front of battle in just like a few shots. So war machines are a big deal, which is why they're so expensive to field. And the Empire was pretty confident because they had some really good war machines and really good crews who ran them. So, you know, wheeling around these massive kind of little tiny turrets of doom on wheels and setting them up and just taking out the opponents. Well, Ben Becker of the List Noir turns up with this new contraption that he has invented, which is at this point very modest. It's just like a little tiny cannon on a stick. It's about this big. And then there's like a cart with bare wheels, and that was it. This machine absolutely devastated the Empire because it was so lightweight and so unexpected in its effectiveness. And the biggest difference was that it fired over. So when you're firing forward with a siege weapon, you've got like a big team of fighters with shields, and you're holding the line, but then you all have to go to the side because here comes the siege engine. Now, if you have a machine that you can fire over your own troops, you can hold your line a lot better. So this little amazing thing completely turned the tide. We beat the Empire because it's a sports game that's actually scored. We beat the Empire. I think the score was 110 to 10. They were very unhappy. They were very unhappy. The Listener became absolutely infamous as this new fighting force with this devastating weapon. They tried to get the machine banned because it was too effective, and the organization was like, we don't see a problem. This is doing, this is doing what it should do. It's not, it's within the parameters. And then we built, well, I say we, but somebody else who works with Ben, his name's Bart Brizzy. He's also a light weapons maker, and he built this kind of facade around the thing, which was, if you imagine the Game of Thrones throne, with all the swords, okay, but in the shape of a bird. So this was the cover of the War Machine, and she's called the Warbird, and she is fantastic. So yeah, the Listener became infamous from that time onward. We're also very good at being spearmen, and in the game, which is fought with large groups of shields and lots of people kind of locked up in tight situations, having a spearman or a team of spearmen who are very good is very useful, because you can just get in there with your 9-foot spear and oh look, there's an opening now. And I did that, but we don't actually do that at BCO because it's a little dangerous to go too high. You don't want to hit people in the face. But yeah, usually you spear low when you're in a sports game. Now if you're fighting someone for real, definitely go for the face, because that's, they're going to stop fighting after that. Murder tips from Stone Swords. So the Listener is my parent guild of pre-salvage experts, and I myself am the captain of the Morning Star, which is my ship, and this is the badge of my ship. I also have a ship sail. It's in Canada in storage, but I have the sail of the ship with the star painted on it for me by a very kind crewman. I have, this was a sigil from another LARP that I did, which I love to wear on my hat because it reminds me of all the people I met at that event. On this side, these are just various things that my friends have given me that I've stitched on, because when I had to leave to come back to Australia, I wanted to carry them with me. So I've got things from my sweetheart, I've got things from one of my best friends, I've got things from other people in the Listener, it's just like little memorabilia. This piece reminds me of a key that I was given by somebody, which was sort of a symbolic friendship gesture of, just one of those encounters that happens in a fantasy setting where somebody does something nice for you and you do something nice for them back, and then they're like, here, have this key that I got, and it's just a nice thing. So yeah, just lots of little memorabilia. I feel like I need to work on it a little more. As you can see, it's terribly sparse. I mean, this is, you know,
Very
shameful.
plump.
Shameful, really. Like, look at all the grey. All the grey area could be covered with
You can
things.
still hold your head upright while wearing it.
One of my favourite
Neck
features,
muscles.
because I like to wear my hair high, I actually put a hole in the hat so that I could, ta-da. Never lose it in a strong wind. Yeah, so it's very practical, and love it a lot. And yeah, it really does tie the outfit together. I'm still in the process of making this. It's just a few different things going on. Layers are very important in costuming. If you're ever passionate about costuming or interested in costuming, it's a really good secret to use layers to achieve effects. Because often what you see when you see different silhouettes or things that are, you know, like a famous character or a superhero or something, usually what has happened is someone has layered to create the illusion of shape. So it's a little trick for folks if you ever should so find yourself. I am so curious about all of you. I'm really interested in why you're here and what do you want to learn, because I feel like I could talk forever about all my things, but I want to know how would it be useful to you all?
How do you make connections to people who do blacksmithing or leatherworking or just even know how to sew?
It's a great question. For me, I think it was really helpful to start going to events and sort of seeing people who had those skills doing their thing. And I didn't necessarily become friends with them, but just knowing that they were out there and being able to see them in that context helped me. But I suppose if there aren't lots of events, Instagram's very good for finding new crafters. I've trained my algorithm now that that's something that I like. Etsy is also really good. So if you don't personally know somebody or you haven't connected with them on social media, Etsy is wonderful because it is the place that a lot of people who are very good at making things do tend to go. So, and usually when people are on Etsy, they are sharing their own work somewhere else as well. So if they're not on Instagram, they're not on Tumblr or, you know, a billion other social apps, they say where their work is, and you can sort of start to build up like a bit of an idea of those people.
Is that also how filmmakers do it? Because you said that you got somebody who actually worked on race cars, their seating, to do the seating for the X-Wing.
Yeah.
How do the studios find somebody like that and think that's a good idea for this X-Wing, this imaginary thing?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great question. I think what happens with film crews is it's sort of a little bit of the head of the crew will start to collect people who are useful. So if the head of the show has worked with somebody before who has skills in a particular area, and then he's given the brief of what they're expected to do as a team. Can people take me seriously with this? Should I take this off? What the person who's running that team will do is they will have an idea of what someone's experience is. So in that situation, he did know he was going to have to make the interior of the X-Jet, and he did know that he had that guy who can do other things, but it was definitely a bonus to that one guy to have that skill. And as it worked out, that one fellow was stretched a little too thin to be leading that particular task, which is why he trained me to do that. But at the beginning of the job, you won't necessarily know what all the problems and complications are going to be, so you're trying to put together a crew of people who might be useful, kind of like you'd have a toolbox of different people who can do different things. Yeah.
I think a big part of that too, Sam, is talking to people and not being afraid that they might not answer. Like, I can't remember how I found you, but you were somewhat intimidating with swords. And so, but I still reached out, and you're the kind of person that responded. I think, like, just by talking to people, I know who to go to if I want something 3D printed, or I know who to go to if I want someone to make me a giant sword, or like there's people in Yarram that do stuff, and you just got to talk to people, and you'll find out, like you say, you'll find out, like I found out someone was doing 3D printing. I didn't need anything 3D printed until I started playing Gloomhaven, and then it's like, hey, you're that guy that can print out these Gloomhaven
play
things.
Gloomhaven?
Oh, so much, so much.
We should talk, mate.
We should.
I'm addicted to Mordheim, which is the parallel of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm happy to leave Mordheim for Gloomhaven.
But I think it can be really scary to see a blacksmith and say and introduce yourself, you know. And I think you just gotta leave that behind. That's a big part of it.
I think it also helps. If you have your thing that you're doing, regardless of what it is. Like I've got lovely friends in Montreal, and they constantly take whatever it is they're working on with them, even to go do a social call. Like they came over to my place before I left Montreal, and it was just they were coming for tea or something, like a cup of tea, literally a cup of tea, and they pull out, it's a cloak with like a facade on it, and there was no shame in that. There was no like apology. Just like someone would do knitting or something. It was like, no, this is the thing that is cool for me, so I'm gonna bring it to me. I'm gonna bring it with me when I'm in this social situation. And I think for some people that's a really good icebreaker, and I think that's also the strategies of my friends in that context. I don't do that myself often, unless I'm working on something that has like due really soon, and then I do that. But I think I've seen a lot of people do that, where they'll turn up to events, or they'll go meet somebody, and they'll just have their own thing, and it won't be for display, but it'll just be kind of like a nice thing to have between you and that other craftsperson, that you can both relate to the fact that you're kind of crafting something. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah? Cool. Yeah, and it doesn't matter if it's good or not, it's just like having the thing there shows that you're prepared to kind of work on it, Yeah. So, yeah, I would encourage you to just find something that you enjoy doing that's portable, so that if you do find people that are doing that, you can be sort of relatable to them, because they might be just as reserved as you about reaching out to somebody, and they might be doing that for the same reason. It would be like putting their craft first, so that people look at the craft, not them. Like a lot of us in the film industry and in the other creative industries, that's what we're doing. It's like, people are hard. So please focus on the thing that I'm making, because I can control that. Like, I can't control this, sort of. But, look at this. This is between you and me, and we can both relate to it. So, yeah, that would be my advice, is just find a thing that you really enjoy doing, and make that, like, a thing you bring. Yeah. In the film industry, it is a little different to other industries, because it's sort of got its own way of doing things. So with big budget shows, they will often hire people that they know over the best choice, which is why, like, say for example, you could have the most amazing skilled performer, but if the director hasn't worked with them before, they might not get chosen, because the director wants to work with somebody that they know that they can work with, rather than taking a risk on somebody. And it's exactly the same with crew. So when you are trying to get work, it's definitely about persistence. It's about building a relationship with somebody that you want to work with, and then just not being too, like, it's like staying available but not pushing it too much, and just leaving yourself open enough that when that opportunity comes, you're able to kind of be there. And it's a fine balance, because there is a lot of like putting things on hold in the film industry, and you don't know when things are going to go ahead, and almost always things are delayed. It's very rare for a production to go ahead when people think it will, because there's so many things that have to line up to make that happen. All these things that are just like moving parts. So when I got started, I was fortunate enough to start at Weta, which is a fixed studio, and the jobs came to them. But in other places when I've been involved in productions, like someone will call you and be like, oh hey, I need you in a month's time, will you be available? like, oh yeah, absolutely. And then 3 weeks from then, they're like, oh, you know, the funding got cancelled, or you know, the actor's sick, or you know, suddenly things will change, and we just have to be flexible. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard because it is a lifestyle choice, honestly. It's a lifestyle choice to be that at somebody else's disposal. But once you have a relationship with other people who are working, it becomes easier because you're all sort of in the same boat. You're all sort of, like, usually what happens is a few people will know each other and they'll work on shows together. So if somebody's getting called for a job and the head of that crew wants to get a good team, the person who's been called might be like, hey, I can suggest this other person who I've worked with on 3 other shows, and the head of crew is like, great, I don't have to go looking for somebody else. Please bring them in. And if they don't work out on that show, it's very rare you'll find out on the production that you're not a good fit for the team. It'll just be like you'll just drift apart in future situations. So like you have to be pretty abrasive to be dropped from a show, like during the time, because everyone just gets in there and works. But yeah, you're building relationships over a long time with people that you can work with, and at its worst, what it looks like is people are very neurotic and false. At its worst, like I'm talking like probably Los Angeles level, you know, like that level of like, oh, I'm so afraid that I'm not going to get the job because I spilled wine on that person in the last, you know, that kind of level of fear. Whereas in the crew level, I think it's a lot more flexibility because you're working together with people over a longer period of time. So your performance on the job is, you've got more time to kind of gel with people or not. Yeah.
Your swords.
My swords! I have swords. Thank you for asking. I do have swords. Yeah, so I'm a sword fighter.
Is it wood or is it foam
Yes,
or
the hilt actually went fine.
All 3. I have
all three?
all 3. So amazingly, I've run out of canvas space. I'm so sorry. Could I call in my lovely assistant?
You want me to hold?
Thank you. Please be the, yes, excellent, the sword displayer. I'll get you to step this way as well. Just realised I've probably been out of shot for the whole thing. This is a wooden sword, made of wood.
That's weird.
This was made for me by River Reed Crafts, who does, he practices doing Japanese swords using Japanese techniques, so katana similar, yeah. But he wanted to start doing Western swords, and he made this for me. It is one of the most beautiful wooden swords I've ever experienced, because it is so well made and everything's like beautifully balanced. Like basically taking the skill of Japanese craftsmanship, but using it to make a Western sword. So what this is to simulate a steel sword. I study swordsmanship from the medieval period, and part of that is working with the real thing, working with steel weapons that are sharp and can cut you or worse, but also working with training partners that I don't wish to do that to. So this is one of the training weapons that I would use when I'm sparring with people, and she's lovely. She's I actually designed her. I wanted to do a design that could work as a single-hander as well as a two-hander. So what you might know as a bastard sword, a long sword. That's what this is. The round pommel is so that I have more rolling action when I'm doing that. I can press that against my hand so that that's just rolling. If you ever see a sword hilt with a pommel that's like pointy and spiky, it's not very practical because you do want to grab it, because that'll also give me extra reach when I'm striking people. Yeah, so that's what this one is.
I'd be too afraid to use it when sparring because I might break it.
He did assure me that this one could stand up to a lot of abuse.
Okay.
Not that I abuse my swords at all, because if I'm hitting somebody with the force to break a wooden sword, I'm hitting my partner way too hard, because I don't want to do that.
I've got a sword that I picked up in a like
Yeah.
store, a Bokken, and
Jesus,
So sorry.
Close to catching
afraid to
that.
do anything with it because it might, I don't want to damage it or anything.
Yeah, and as you can see, I treat it with great respect.
Obviously.
Thank you, Matt. No, the poor thing. It's stood up to a lot of sparring, so I have great faith in the maker's ability to have made me. This is a steel sword. This is a short sword, such as what was used pretty much from the time that people were dueling each other in sort of fancy gentlemanly duels. This is the rapier became the short sword. So the rapier was a very, very long weapon. This one was the sort of more practical version. And this was in use from the late 17th century, so I think sort of 50 years after the time of Shakespeare, through to as recently as the beginning of last century. And this was the weapon that when people were fencing and doing duels, this is what they were using. So modern fencing, the foils that you see, those are the safe practice weapon for this. This is not a safe weapon. This is a... I'm not doing that too.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's solid.
Got two swords. It's not getting through me.
So this is a little larger than what they were. It's a little heavier than what they were. That's mostly because people who are making swords these days they're not trained in how to do it in the way that's as light and refined as possible. Most historical swords were very light and very practical. They were not heavy. And that's the biggest misconception that's come out of Hollywood and the modern fantasy era, is that swords were really heavy and unwieldy. It's not true, because a real sword needs to be a weapon. You can use it in a fight, and if it's too heavy,
So why isn't someone put onto that? It's a
well,
niche thing.
people who practice with the historical weapons know this. We're trying very slowly to educate people, but half the problem is that when you buy a sword, the person who's making it has to know that as well, because if they think this weapon is fine, because this weight is fine, and they don't know any better, then all of us are being supplied with something that's too heavy, and it reinforces the idea, reinforces the paradigm that this is a really heavy weapon. Exactly. So often a lot of people make swords in their backyard, or the grandpa made one and they've got one in the family, or they bought one from somebody who's making swords in the Ukraine or in India or China or somewhere, and it looks like it should, it looks right, but the weight, it's because you need skill. You need a lot of skill in making swords to be able to make it. It'd be like if someone had once heard about what a guitar looked like, but they didn't actually know how to make it, and they just made an approximation of it.
And
So-
some of that would be just driven by word too, like it wouldn't be documented with with weights and stuff like that. It'd be just handed down knowledge from
Absolutely.
like generational
Very,
good sword makers.
very interestingly, everything in the medieval period was designed with perfect ratios. So the concept of mathematics as being the divine sort of way of God's expression in the earth, they tried to imitate that in everything in medieval design. So when you think about cathedrals, the way that cathedrals have that beautiful kind of symmetry and geometry, they did that with swords as well. So on my arm I actually have an example of how ratios were used in medieval sword design.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, so everything corresponds to itself. It was perfect, absolutely perfect, and medieval makers knew this. This was pretty standard. This is not to say that every no, my battery. Oh no, it's not plugged in. Why is that? Sorry, I'm about to lose the internet. Oh well, if it goes, it goes. So yeah, people making medieval swords were aware of the ratios and the desired result. But needless to say, a lot of us these days have absolutely no idea about this as being a common thing. Yeah. You guys can look at that later if you want. Or I'll post a link or something. Thank you. This last thing, this is a foam sword for purposes of sport. Could I ask you just to check the power going to
Here
that?
we are.
Oh, you're a
It's
so onto it.
Yeah.
So this is a foam sword from Kalimazoo, which is a company in Quebec, which serves the 12,000 strong Latin community as well as international people. I love this sword so much. It is a really excellent tool. I can use it pretty safely. It's got a good core to it, so it keeps the foam straight. When I hit, if I'm using reasonable force, I'm not going to cause damage to my opponent. I don't have to worry if I'm in a big throng of 800 people. I'm not going to worry about how this is going to hurt somebody if I accidentally just turn into them, as you would if you were using something solid. So I would call this a sports sword, but it's a very, very nice one because it's a few years old now, but it also, when they're new, they're made to look aesthetically really beautiful. So I can use these for training as well. So when I'm training for martial arts, these work really well. Obviously not a pirate cutlass, although I could. If I was training in martial arts from that period, I could totally use this and have done so. But I have other long swords, which those coming to the workshop tomorrow. Those you'll see the foam sword trainers that I use. Yeah. So I love having a lot of different tools for fighting as well, and I think I'm just a tool addict at this point. Yeah. Feel free to pass this around. When you pass it around, please keep the tip down, so you can. Yeah.
Can you see if this is charging now?
I